Welcome to another week. I am so excited. I have yet again stalked somebody on the interwebs, and I have found somebody to come and chat with me about what mental health is not. And I'm very, very excited to introduce you all to my new friend, Kate Acton. She is a licensed professional counselor and writer in Kansas City, Kansas. In her practice, she sees adult women facing periods of change and transition in their lives, whether that be the changes and challenges of motherhood, a change in life stage or relationship status, a season of exploring a deeper sense of identity. I love this part, or processing old life junk to make way for a better, healthier self. Kate loves helping women identify and process the mental, emotional, and relational patterns that get in the way of becoming their most authentic, truest, and bravest versions of themselves. She sees clients through her private practice, Kate Acton Counseling, and she will soon be on maternity leave with she and her husband's second baby, true pandemic parents. We'll be talking about that. So she is not currently accepting new clients until later this fall, but you can certainly, as I have done, which is how I stalked her and found her, you can follow her on Instagram and Facebook on the page Kate Acton Counseling LPC. Make sure you stay up to date with her and enjoy other notes and goodies along the way. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Kate Acton.
Hi, thank you.
Hello, what a pleasure. Well, I always say to everybody, I like to start the conversations with how do we know each other? And when it is me sliding into someone's DMs, I save them from embarrassing my thirstiness. And I say, I slid into your DMs because specifically of a post that we're going to get to, but which things that are not mental health. But I also wanted everyone to get to know a little bit more about you. So tell me a little bit more about you as a clinician, your education, your specializations. What do we need to know?
Yeah, so I have a little private practice, Kansas City, Kansas. It's really wild how it came together. I graduated and became a first-time mom right at the start of the pandemic. And so gosh, it was a rough time for everybody. So we kind of worked our way through that, of course, became first-time parents, got started with our pediatrician for our daughter, took some time to think about how do I want to do this? I just graduated. This is what I love to do. But oh my God, the world's on fire and I'm a first-time mom.
Yes.
So took some time to think about it, zoom forward a few months. Her pediatrician posts, hey, I'm thinking of renting out our second office for a therapist for kids, for moms. And I'm like, hey,
Hello.
that might be me. And that's how I've stumbled into this exact situation. And kind of because of that, because of the situation, because of the very recent life experience I had just had, my practice is built around kind of focusing on women, adult women. I see a lot of moms, first-time moms who've been around the block for a while, but are still struggling with perinatal mood struggles or just parenting, emotional stuff. So, and then I also see other women who are like not moms, like they kind of come from all different directions, but that's kind of the focus. But I love to be able to help women work through stuff that is getting in the way of being who they want to be. As moms, as women, as human people. That's kind of how I've stumbled into this wild position.
I love that. That's so great. So, and you graduated with your master's just right around 2020?
Yep, we were the first. It was May 2020, and so we were that graduating class.
Okay, I'm wearing long sleeves for those who are listening to the podcast. I have full body chills. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can't I know people who were through this will relate to this. The devastation of working so hard through a grad program, fulfilling your dream, going through the grad school it sucks.
Delightful. It's the best.
It is, oh my gosh, so easy, like so easy, anybody can do it, just like whatever. So on those like really, really difficult times in school, you just have this picture of yourself in the hood getting the hood.
Walking across the stage.
Yep. And we were the cohort that didn't get it. And so that was super, super hard. So pandemic parents, pandemic professional, like
Wow.
working with people dealing with the pandemic professionally after, it's a whole thing.
Truly, my goodness, absolutely. And did you ever get to come back and walk, or is that something that you?
And yep, we didn't. And I don't want to say too much, but I asked for it
Oh,
actually.
get out of town.
Yeah.
Well,
And
that's really shocking to me because I know there
yeah.
are some programs. There's someone I follow, and she got her master's degree,
Yeah.
and she was a May 2020 bebe as well, and at USC. And
Yeah.
so they went back in May 2020.
May the next year.
Walked May 2022 of this year.
A
which
lot
is
of students did
lovely.
that. Yeah, for reasons that I do not know.
Let's start a letter writing petition. But truly, I mean, we talk about this all the time in therapy about like termination and how important it is. And you're a mental health program, and even to do some sort of adjusted something, even if it's not the major, like the full university program, at least your smaller school, your college could have done something. That's really interesting to me to hear specifically as like a mental health. I was talking about this with one of my supervisees earlier because he had a client who decided she doesn't want to do the program anymore and really has made a lot of stuff, but she's just like ready to move on. And he's like, right, but I just really want you to come and like that. I think people use like colloquially closure.
Yeah. And absolutely.
That's very important in mental health. And I'm so sorry to hear that. Wow. And then of course, to give birth in 2020 or 2020, 2021.
Yeah, 2020. But she was born in November. I will say that I love the professors that were at the school. I know that they did their best.
Yes.
I think, I think there was a lot of decisions and moving pieces that were out of a lot of people's control.
Of course.
They sent us a little congratulations package with like individualized, like custom stuff. So I don't want to like super, poop on, but yeah, there was some of the bigger moving pieces for some reason for us didn't come together. And it did seem unusual compared to kind of how other schools did. But yes, so then I was in the early stages of pregnancy when all of this started happening. So we gave birth November 2020. So we kind of were through the first height, and then summer kind of, in those first waves. This is like, COVID 101, like
right.
alpha, and then we hit the fall, and of course, rates were starting to kind of go up again. Yes. And that's when we were giving birth to our first little baby.
Oh my goodness gracious. What a story. Yeah. And it's so interesting because in certain ways, I think a lot of people, the pandemic is over and we know it's not, but like emotionally. And then, I was in a classroom yesterday. I had our summer semester at KU started, and I was talking to my students, and I was just like, there's still a lot to process from that. Like, please don't feel as though you have to, air quotes, be over it. It's strange to be in a room, and they're all in different various levels. The last semester that I taught, everyone was in the same cohort. Everyone was graduating. They were done. This one, I've got people that was their very second class of their entire master's program. I was like, no pressure. And then people who are in their third year because they're doing part-time, and everywhere in between. So I said, it's like, some of you have not been in school during, some of you have come straight from a bachelor program that you spent half of it in a pandemic. It's strange to be sucking the same oxygen as somebody else. I still think it is. I mean, I work from home too. Obviously I do virtual care, and obviously we're virtual now. So, but yeah, there's still a lot to process.
And it's going to be affecting us for generations societally. So it's going to, and I think we still have yet to see really what the effects are going to be, because we're still in it. And so we can't really accurately evaluate how this has affected us yet,
Right.
So
the data is not complete at this
moment. The data is not complete. We are still in the experiment.
Sure. So I was curious, obviously you got into mental health before the pandemic. What was it that made you decide to get into the pandemic? Okay, I quit. I'm done. What made you get into mental health?
Into mental health, man. Oh, it's such a hard question to answer. Like, but
Yeah.
I honestly, the truest answer that I can say is just like, I just feel like I was made for it.
Mm,
And that just is the simplest answer. I feel like my individual personality, my skill sets, my
mm,
interests have always leaned towards being super, super curious about what people are
yeah. Yeah.
and what they're like and why and how. um so, even as a kid, I was that nosy little kid who was like trying to tell everybody what to do. And so
Who?
basically,
What? Never.
who never, that is never a therapy thing. Now I just like have the professional skills and do it better and more appropriately.
That's hilarious. Yes.
But just like that, there's just something so interesting about people. And so, there's of course like different journeys to that. But I started off potentially like, I remember in junior high, we would do like, like you do the little like career tests and you do like,
Yes.
what do you
Yes.
want to be when you grow up? And I several years ago, I looked back at some of the old school stuff and was like, I want to be a counselor. And then somewhere along the way, I got kind of scared of it because it
Uh-huh.
just really felt like it's like such a dream and
Yeah.
like a desire. So I took like a brief little detour through like early childhood education in
Mhm.
undergrad, actually, and it just never fit. It never worked. I tried really hard, but it never clicked. And then in undergrad, I took some human and family service classes, and suddenly it just was like all the doors
Yes.
opened, and it just was so much easier. Like there's no other way to put it. Like it just was so much easier. I cared.
Mm.
I was like fascinated. And at that point it was obvious, like
Yes.
this is it. And so that was all she wrote on that, really.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And it's nice to be able to check and see, like, is this really what I want to do? Maybe I can try some of the things, but then you're like, oh, it's super easy to care when I'm
Mhm.
passionate about it.
Mhm. Yeah, shocking.
Shocking, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and then, yeah, now there you are. So now here is where those of you listening, if you're like, I don't care about, psychodynamic theory of therapy, you can just go ahead and hit the skip button a couple times. But I'm a nerd and I love to learn about people's like what's the modality, like where are you coming from? So I noticed on your website that you have listed kind of your models of practice of psychodynamic, attachment oriented, self-psychology, existentialism, AEDP. I would love for you to share with our listeners out there kind of, you don't have to go like, this is not a class.
Okay, good.
But just love to hear a little bit more about that and like, what is it from some of those little pieces of things? Again, it doesn't have to be like, according to Sigmund Freud, it's not going to like, please no. But I'm just curious. I'd love to hear more as much as you feel like sharing.
Yeah. So it was in grad school where I got introduced to a lot of those, modalities, of course. We all know like Freud and like
Right.
all the jokes and stuff. And so, but there was one of the semesters you kind of narrow in on one of your modalities just to try them out, and you take that particular class. And so I took psychodynamic that semester. And it just was so interesting. It just seemed to fit a lot of how I think about people, how I understand people. One of the things that kind of surprised me about psychodynamic was that it wasn't super like, obviously it's different than what you see in the movies where they're laying on a couch,
Right.
they're
Sitting
sitting
behind you, judging.
yeah, it actually was a lot more vibrant than I expected it to
Mm,
be.
mm.
It really focused on the clinical terms of like transference and countertransference,
Yes.
which basically means what is it in me that makes you feel things and what is it in you that makes me feel things, like how
Mhm.
do we make each other feel things? What do we remind each other of?
Sure.
And that's very emotionally electric and very relational and interactive. And that was really interesting to me. And I think we were doing, I'm trying to remember if this class was happening at the same time we were even doing internships. So I think there was like even some direct parallels to what's going on with
Sure.
clients and things. And there just were things that clicked. And so AEDP is another model that's very similar to that, but even more kind of intensely focused on processing the emotions that do come up as you're impacting each other, in the room, as I'm making you feel things and you're making me feel things, and being very honing in on processing it when those things come up. And all of those to heal the yucky things that come up,
Mhm.
to reconnect in healthier ways, reconnect in ways that actually are more adaptive and help you actually flourish instead of being stuck in, rough patterns that get in the way. And so, yeah, and so then just kind of taking pieces of that.
Yes.
Since I've graduated, inner child stuff is really fascinating, kind of those parts of self. So,
Mhm.
as we're impacting each other, different parts of you will come up, different parts of me will come up, and processing those in those ways of you then relating to yourself. And it's just, ooh,
Yes.
it's awesome.
I love that. I'm bringing it up again, but I'm teaching this class on brief cognitive behavior therapy for suicidal ideation and self-injurious behavior. And so I'm making it very clear. I'm like, maybe in your interview, someone's going to ask you what sort of modality you use, certainly. And then, of course, if you do private practice, a lot of people really are curious. And, with the Googles these days, people are a lot more intelligent on what they're talking about. So clients who have no mental health background at all still are curious, which I realize we did not define AEDP, accelerated experiential dynamic psychotherapy. So in case anybody's like, y'all keep saying this and I don't know what you're saying, that's what that means.
Yes.
And so while you don't have to be rigid in following everything to the letter, it colors our practice, right? So it gives kind of a loose framework and structure. Well, structure is not a good word when I'm saying loose, a loose framework of what kind of colors and drives where we go. And it's interesting because I took a course over the weekend with someone named Karen Kleiman, and in the session, she articulated that she created postpartum depression in the 80s. I not like created, but like created, she's like
Yeah.
the godmother of all godmothers of perinatal health.
Yeah.
And so we talk about the art of holding. And it's funny because I also really love solution focused brief therapy, because as a person, I'm very type A. I'm very like, I don't need to talk about the problem. I want to talk about the goals. Where are we going? How do we get there? And that's the exact opposite of holding.
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
for sure.
and it's so funny because for me, I was like, oh, no, I can do these things with different clients in different ways.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm new into the holding space, and I read the book, The Art of Holding, and everything, and does not in any way an expert make. But I can aspire to continue to grow and learn. And so there are times where I look back and I'll be like, wow, I really could have just sat with that person instead of being like, great, so what's the goal? What are we going to do? And where do we go next? And then there are some people like me who are super type A and who are like, I need to be doing something to be able to sit with this. I need to be able to do some work.
Yeah.
And then, of course, anywhere in between. So, well, like I said, so hopefully anybody who's skipping ahead, come back to us now. If you don't care about attachment oriented therapy, we're back now. We're getting into it. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I've been wanting to have this conversation since May 24th. I haven't really known how. I didn't know. I didn't want to do it by myself. Sometimes I just sit here and talk to myself on a computer screen and talk about certain things or provide some psychoeducation topics, whatever. And I just haven't really known. And then I saw your post, and I told you earlier, I was like, I saw it and immediately sent your post to you and was like, please, can we talk about this? Here's who I am. Please, please, please. So what I wanted to talk about first was just the post itself, which was things that are on mental health. And I really loved, I don't know if you want, I mean, would you like to go through and share it? I'm happy to go through and
Go
read
ahead.
it.
You're doing great.
Okay. I was going to say it's your post, so I don't want to. So from your post, you went through and listed in this beautiful graphic, things are not mental health. So bullying is not a mental health. It's not mental health. It's a social emotional issue, right? And I'm just going to go through these, and then I think we'll kind of chat about them again and kind of come back. So bad parenting, and I love that you put that in quotes, bad parenting is a social cultural issue and largely a matter of opinion. Shooting someone, this is a behavior. This is not mental health. This is a behavior. Racism and white supremacy, this is an ideology issue. Hate, also an ideology and an emotional issue. Media is a systems and cultural issue and also often a matter of opinion. I think we can all agree on that. Poverty is a system and cultural issue. Being, quote, obviously crazy or, quote, messed up in the head. These are insults. These are all of these are problematic issues that may lead to, capital letters, may lead to mental health conditions, but are not in themselves mental illness. And it's important that as we continue to open up about mental health, which is great, that we want to make sure that we are, in fact, speaking appropriately. And so, like I said, I've said it multiple times now, said it to you multiple times. Like I saw that and I was like, this is what we need to be discussing. Because after I had my initial reaction, when I found out what happened in Uvalde, which I won't go into, my next thought was they're going to come for us. They're going to come for mental health providers. It's the mental health system in Texas who is to blame, or in Buffalo, New York, who is to blame, or in Southern California, and every other
society at large.
Right, society at large. It's a mental health issue. And it's like, well, first of all, when you defund mental health by $20 million in February, we can see where your priorities are, to be very specific in that case. But then also too, recognizing how do we speak about these things. One could say that a person who goes and harms other people is not in a mentally healthy space, but is it to say that shooting somebody is mental illness?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, it's that's exactly the context that this post came from. Mm-hmm. After the shooting in Texas, very similar, huge emotional reaction that I think a lot of people had, just seeing how horrifying, horrifying. It's you would like to say it's unimaginable, but it's happening so often now. I still feel like it's unimaginable to, for 19 children and 2 teachers, and this is not the first. So processing through just that huge grief, rage, helplessness, all of those feelings that all of us humans felt after that shooting. I'm not a guns expert. I'm not a gun safety person, but I do know mental health. And I do know how to find and synthesize research. And so as I'm awake in the middle of the night, rocking my baby, anxious, stressed out, I've got my phone in my hand and I'm putting together posts about educating for mental health, because that's what I can do. So that's
love it. Okay, I just want to say, because that's right. Like, where do we find the things that we can do? And that's what I love it, Kate. I love it. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was like,
no, yeah, that's it. What can you do? Well, I can do that one. So this post, I'm trying to remember what exactly put that in my head. Something I saw, something a politician said, something else that I saw on Instagram. I don't remember. But it made me realize that, of course, we're talking about mental health, and we're of course going to blame mental health. We're going to blame media. We're going to blame bullying. We're going to blame bad parenting. We're going to blame kids who are on the TV screen too long, blah, blah, blah. Like, we're going to blame about everything that we can. So knowing that we're talking about mental health. All right, well, let's talk about that then. Okay. Let's define what mental health is, what mental illness is, what mental illness is not. So that's kind of where the post itself came from. And those specific things in the post were just random snippets of things that generally tend to be brought up in these situations of mass gun violence, you know, the bullying, the bad parenting, the blah, blah, blah. So when I made that, I realized, when I thought about it, I realized we're talking about mental health so much more in our society, and that is incredible. Mental health advocates have been pushing for that and working towards that for long before I was ever on the scene.
Sure.
We're more fluent in normalizing different diagnoses. We, in my generation, it's, you see a meme, every other meme about your relationship with your therapist, and like, you know, it feels so much more normal to go to therapy. All of those are incredibly beneficial things. I also realized, as it has become more commonly understood, it's not always getting translated accurately or getting talked about accurately in the broader public. And so then when horrifying events happen, like mass gun violence, or just, oh gosh, any other thing, people start talking about mental health, but I realize they're not understanding it correctly, and they're not talking about it correctly.
Right.
And that causes problems, big problems. So that's where I came from for the post itself, realizing that it's incredible we're talking about this, and this isn't even the only thing. There's lots of little random examples of how, as it's translating into kind of broader conversation, it's not always translating accurately or very concisely, and then it has kind of a not great like effect as it rolls out. But so yeah, that's what I think, that's what I perceived. And so then that's what I was talking about in the post. So the post comes from a place of what mental illness is not.
Yes.
So as I talk about it, I think it's helpful to talk about what mental health is, what the difference is between the mental health and the mental illness. Is that the terms themselves, mental health, is it okay to kind of talk?
Do it.
Okay.
Please.
So one of the most foundational misunderstandings in our broader society, and where I think a lot of this kind of springs from, is that generally speaking, we talk about mental health and mental illness with those terms as if they're interchangeable terms, and they're not.
Yes.
That is a fundamental misunderstanding. So the way that I explain it to people is that everyone has a mental health.
Right.
Not everyone has a mental illness. And the way that you can kind of compare it to is if you think about it with physical health. Everybody has a physical health because they have a physical body.
Right.
But not everybody has a physical illness. So, and there are different things that can impact the levels of your physical health. If you've got, you know, a bunch of stress going on, and, you know, like, you're really super tired, your physical health is not going to feel that great. You're going to feel kind of sluggish. You're going to feel kind of tired. You're going to feel kind of stressed out. Maybe your body kind of hurts a bit. And then you get a break with your work project or whatever's going on. You get a really good night's sleep. You feel so much better. That is going to be a fluctuation in your physical health.
Right.
Now, let's say your work situation is chronic. Let's say you live in an area where you're in kind of a food desert. You don't have access to nutritious food. You live in an area where resources are scarce. You have chronic stress. Your physical health is going to slowly, eventually take that on in ways, and it may develop a physical illness. It may develop a physical condition that you would go to a doctor, that they would have diagnostic criteria that if you match those, you then have a diagnosis of physical illness. So that is almost directly applicable to. I
have no notes.
Yep, that's the notes. That's the show, kids.
Yeah.
And so, but if you conflate the two, then when you talk about it, especially in mental health, you in the context of physical health, if you think that physical health and physical illness is the same, you might get confused and say, well, that person has no access to food. They live in a food desert. Of course, they're impacted by that. That's a physical illness. No. That is the body's impact of a system,
Yes.
of lack of access, a lack
Yes.
of resources, and the physical health is going to suffer to the degree that then it becomes an illness.
Yes.
So it is impacted by the system, but the system itself is not the illness.
Right.
Right.
I love it.
Right.
I don't feel like people are having that conversation. Like,
exactly.
We're not looking at it that way. It's like, well, there's something wrong with you.
Yep.
And it's like, no, there's something wrong with the system in which we live that is continuing to systemically participate in some of these things, because we're not making changes, yet we want some sort of change, which is the definition of insanity.
Exactly.
And which is why so many of us feel like we're banging our heads against the wall, or we feel so helpless, because this is the definition of insanity, and we continue to watch it play out. I mean, I don't even know what the number is now, but how many mass gun violence activities have occurred since May 24th even?
I think we're up to, I know, at least 17.
I mean,
last weekend was 17.
Get out of here. What are we talking about? And so for people to be so flip as to say like, oh, it's a mental health concern, and it's like, well,
no, you're talking about the wrong thing. You're saying the wrong thing. Because you're and that's the problem, is because we're talking too vaguely that we're missing the point on what we're trying to solve, because we're blaming a broad boogeyman term.
Boogeyman term. I love that. Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
Yep. No, that's one of the other posts, is the term mental health is just vague and broad enough. It's the perfect boogeyman for these horrifying events.
Right.
So we can say, oh, it's a mental health issue. Well, one, what are the systems that are impacting any of those people's particular mental health? And are you talking about a systems issue, or are you talking about a mental illness? Because remember, mental health and mental illness are not the same things.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is the research is too thin, and in fact does not lead to a consistent, reliable, repeatable conclusion that any specific mental illness, which is not the same as mental health, but a mental illness, such as a diagnosis of depression, anxiety, even the ones that you kind of, well, they're clearly a psychopath, there is no direct causal link between any specific diagnosed mental illness and mass shooting events.
Amen. Because you can't say every person who has antisocial personality disorder, sociopathy, goes out and shoots people. And you can't say that every person who has gone out and shot people has antisocial personality.
We know for a fact they don't.
We know that to be true.
No, that they don't. But you look at the mass shooters, you look at their mental health history, you look at their conditions, and they don't all have the same situation going on. So you know that that's not the case. Also, you look at how many of the other multiple thousands of people who have a particular diagnosis, such as antisocial personality or any of the other boogeyman consequently stigmatized mental health condition, they're not going out and shooting. So the causal link is just not there. So when you say there's layers and layers and layers to this problem. So when you say mental health is causing the problems, you're missing the boat because it's way too broad. You're not talking about the right thing. Okay, get specific. Mental illnesses cause mass shooting. Incorrect. The evidence shows that that's just not there.
That's right. Because not every person with a mental illness has a gun in their hand and is in a grocery store, a church, a
Yep.
school,
Yep.
so on and so forth. That's exactly right. And I love that. I love being able to qualify these things in a way of like talking about the boogeyman, because those of you who listen to my podcast know I love Drag Race, and the Jada Essence Hall of it all. Look over there. That's literally, I mean, that's literally it. Like, oh, you want me to stop taking money from, if I may just be so bold, the gun lobbyists. Yeah. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm not doing that. So what I'm going to do instead is look over there and but
mental health, it's bullying, it's
the boogeyman of bullying, and but the teachers aren't doing enough because they're not stopping bullying, and the parents aren't doing enough because they're not making better children who don't bully, and they're not parenting enough, and and it's like, or you could actually do something that you actually have the power to make some changes in other things. Like, yeah, you yourself maybe can't do as much about bullying, but you can do something else over here about the guns, and about the money that goes to mental health.
And they're lumping all of those things under the umbrella of mental health, and that's wrong. Yes, that's incorrect. Those things, and that was then the point of the post of like, it's this, it's that, it's mental health, it's bullying, it's bad parenting, it's this. See, the mental health of America is messed up. Like, look at all these things. Like, those aren't mental health. Those are not mental illness. Those are systems. Those are opinions. Those are insults.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I just appreciate you so much coming on, because I think, like I said, when this happened, I was like, I need to talk about this. I want to talk about it openly. I don't want to get on here and ramble for 75 minutes to myself about nothing. I want to have a cogent discussion. And this is, I think, exactly what it is, because like I said, it's, it's a mental health problem. And it's like, well, first of all, let's talk about the funding for mental health in the United States. Sure. Let's talk about the access. Let's talk about, if I may get on my own soapbox, in a very selfish manner, I'm trying to get licensure in other states, and we just need national licensure. We need, it costs how much money for a bachelor's degree, how much money for a master's degree. Then you have to sit for, in my case, I'm a social worker, so an LMSW, licensed master social worker. Then you have to get 2 years of supervision, which you almost always have to pay for. Some agencies provide it. Then you have to sit for another exam, which you have to pay for. You have to pay for your license every 2 years, which you're also paying for your LMSW while you're doing that. And I know I'm being annoying and rambling about this, but I just need people to know, like, and I got paid $41,000 out of grad school. I took $75,000 of grad school loans. God bless my parents. They paid for my undergrad. Could you imagine if I had to pay for 4 years at Purdue?
Well, I don't have to imagine.
You, right? Exactly. And so that's what I'm saying is that, let's talk about that. And even just the barriers, then. Again, not to like, my hair is up. I can't like flip my hair obnoxiously, but like, I'm a licensed specialist clinical social worker supervisor. I have been doing that for years, and I still can't get my license in New York because I need somebody to verify that I got my supervision. I'm like, I can't even get to that place. And so we're creating all of these barriers. Like California is talking about their shortage of mental health providers. Have you tried to get a license in California? It is actually 4 digits worth of money to do so, plus a 15-hour course, plus a 6-hour course. Don't quote me on that. Someone's going to come back and be like, well, it's actually, it is insane. It is, but it is over $1,000 to get that license. And we're just setting up all these systemic barriers that are preventing people from getting access to the things that they want to do professionally, that we talked about earlier, that gives them passion, that they care about. And we're not doing those things. We're not setting people up for success in that manner. So if you want to even just, let's talk about mental health. These are the things that we are dealing with as people in the profession, let alone the people who are on the ground in the schools trying to have, where are the social workers? Where are the licensed mental health professionals in schools? Where are the resources to support them in doing their job? Where are the sufficient number of mental health employees per child? Where is we're not like, we wouldn't even have time to talk about insurance and like what the barriers of access are for. So even just getting into the field, and also not considering how inaccessible it is to get into the field, how difficult it is to provide funded, adequate care once you're in the field. And that's not even addressing any of the populations and demographics of people who are
historically excluded in
Oh
our
gosh.
Mhm. So like, thank God we had I had access to financial aid that we're going to be paying back forever, but I had access to it,
Amen.
and I had support to get through school. And when things with school got wiggly, like I had resources behind me to
That's
help
right.
get through this, so like it just, oh my gosh. Okay. So anyway, it
No, I was
just,
just say, just to
ugh.
jump in on that quickly, is that I am sitting and bitching from a place of a lot of privilege. I just told you my parents paid for my undergrad. I mean, I was an RA my senior year, so that paid for a year. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I
Yeah,
am sitting from a place of
exactly.
enormous privilege, and I'm bitching about this.
And it's still difficult.
And it is still so. I still have $30,000 of student loans that I'm paying off, and I graduated a decade ago.
Yeah.
And it's
So the fact that
crazy.
it's so difficult from such a place of immense privilege, which same, then we're shocked why that there's a shortage of professionals of
Exactly.
people of color and Black and
Exactly.
Indigenous and LGBT. Like, well, because like the systems are set up to exclude. So
That's exactly
yeah,
right.
yeah. And then once you get into it, like, geez Louise. So if you want to talk about, like, that was actually another post that had come out about that time. Like, okay, if you think that
Yes.
mental health or mental illness is creating, I think at that point it was 212 mass shooting events this year, then I better see you calling your senators to increase funding, access, and insurance ease of use for mental health for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you really think that's what it is, put your time and your money where your mouth is.
Well, and the people who are saying it are also often people in those positions of power who are the ones that we're trying to call and we can't get through to. Or I can't tell you how many times I've left a message for senators and representatives. I have never received a call, an email, nothing back.
Yeah.
It's right. So then it's like, well, you're not representing me, you're representing your own pocketbook.
Mhm.
And so it is kind of getting in that space of like, where else can we make some changes? Because my first thing was like, everybody please go vote, and then I'm like, think about the gerrymandering of voting and the access. Like, I'm
People have
from near,
voted.
yeah,
The
I'm from near
people have
Louisville.
voted.
What'd you
It's
say?
not trans. So the fact is people have voted.
That's right.
We can't get our will to trickle down through to the policies.
That's right. Yeah. And
Mhm.
I'm born and raised outside of Louisville, Kentucky. And I don't know if you remember the voting election ridiculosity that was that. Where like there was like one polling place open and it was only open a
Gosh.
certain number of hours. And if you weren't inside or you weren't already in line, then they wouldn't let you. I mean, just the rigmarole, the bonkers nationness, that is such a professional term, of it all. The things that are put up in place to just continuously, like, again, a systems issue, systemically not be able to do that. So yeah, it's a space where I start to feel kind of helpless. And then I think, what else can I do? And then I find people like you where I'm like, great, I can have somebody in this space where I know people are listening and people also want to know. And it's like, we can speak more intelligibly about some of these things and make sure that when we hear somebody say something, we raise our hand and say, no, 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 no.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
These are not the relation that you think it is.
Yeah.
And to be fair, to be very fair, it
Mhm.
is correct that we have a mental health crisis in this nation. That's a fact.
Yes. Yes.
That is an undeniable fact. And it is
Yes.
something that has been going on pre-pandemic, pre the latest, like, coming up of like mass shootings, all that kind of stuff. We were in grad school. I was in grad school in like 2017 talking about the alarming raising rates of suicidality in teens and rates of depression starting to skyrocket. The pandemic with alcohol, substance use shooting through the
Oh
roof,
my. And domestic and partner violence.
violence, exactly, all of those things.
Yes.
So none of the, like,
Ugh.
the thing that I hope to be very clear about is that we do have a mental health crisis. It goes back to that analogy of, look at what the systems are that are impacting what a person's mental health looks like. We got a freaking pandemic going on. We've got isolation, we've got stress and strain. So it's logical that mental health struggles are going to increase. And For a lot of people, that is then going to translate into an increase in diagnosed mental illnesses and conditions, because remember, your mental health is not discrete from your mental illness,
Right.
but they're not interchangeable. And so this is undeniable. However, if we're going to talk about that in the context of raising mental health crisis, or the alarming mass gun violence events, or talking about it in the context of teen, the rates of teen, suicidality, we need to be correct and accurate and specific in what we're talking about when we talk about those
Amen.
situations.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise we're talking about it too vaguely, which means we can't solve whatever the actual problems are that we're trying to solve.
Absolutely.
So for the example of like just with the mass shooting, because that's the one that I have been thinking about, is, there's as of course the research is always ongoing about what commonalities are there amongst mass shooters. There's not any one clear causal link for any of it, but what are the links? Like, what are the links, plural?
Right.
So what if all or most of the mass shooters have a mental illness? Well, we know that alone is not the cause of what's happened, but is it a particular illness plus an ideology issue? Is it a particular mental illness plus a systemic issue of lack of resources? Is it, or plus a few things, plus a few things, plus access to weapons that create mass death. So what are the links in the chain that then spark a person to commit such an atrocious action?
Absolutely.
That's why it is so critical to be clear, discrete, and accurate. Because if we are not clear, discrete, and accurate, we are missing the chains that could potentially solve the problem that we're looking at. But if we're just wanting to say mental health and lump things that are not mental health in it, we are not being clear and specific and being able to actually sort out what the discrete links are in the chain that could create these horrible events. And it leaves us disempowered to actually solve whatever the particular problems are. What links are there? What systemic issues are there? What ideological beliefs are being fed down kids' throats that contribute to this? Exactly. So if you're spending time, it's like, oh, it's mental health, but you're not addressing the rising rates of extremism. You're not addressing rising rates of ideological, like dangerous ideologies. You're not addressing lack of physical resources of food and nutrition and housing instability. And like, if you're not addressing the specific issues, the problem's just going to keep going and going and going and going.
Amen. And I want my kind of final thought on that, in addition to everything you said, is it's just insulting to people with mental health diagnoses.
Yeah.
Like just such a broad brush. Oh, well, you have a mental illness and therefore I got to put my eyes on you because that's what happened. That's what causes mass gun violence.
Mass shootings. You're clearly the next mass shooter. Can you imagine how horrifying that would be? You're a kid struggling at home. You have depression. You kind of want to end your life, but you're so desperate for help and you can't. And then a school teacher pulls you in and it's like, you've been identified as the next school shooter. Like, can you imagine how horrifying and devastating? Yeah. And that's one of the logical results that comes from not being clear and specific in actually understanding what the contributing factors are to a problem, but instead painting it with a broad, vague brush.
Broad and vague. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I know that you are about to bring another tiny, beautiful human into this world. So I hope I will be reaching out again, because I could sit here and talk to you for hours and hours. And I love this. I really appreciate you, because you have helped me very selfishly to feel a little less helpless, because I've wanted to be able to talk about this. And I think that this is exactly the information that a lot of people need. Is there's just, somebody sent a meme to me once about like, we all thought that more access to information would make us all more intelligent. And now we know that that's very much not true. And
Yeah.
honestly, it's like kind of counterproductive, even that we have the most access to the most information that we've ever had. And yet as a society, we seem to not be hitting the target.
Yeah.
And so being able to have people listen and say like, oh yeah, I didn't really think about that. I need to make sure that I don't just pop off like our mental health system's so bad. Like speak intelligibly. Don't conflate the things that you think that you're talking about, making sure that you're having true cogent discussions about what's really impacting us in the situation. And that's exactly, I think, what you've done. No, I'm going to take out the I think. That's exactly what you've done today. So thank you. Where can everybody find you?
Okay, so I am both on Instagram, Facebook, my website. Instagram is Kate Acton Counseling LPC, all smushed together. Facebook is the same thing plus NCC at the end. And so my little profile picture is the same in both. So if you find me on one or the other, I spend most of my time on the Instagrams. You just because you got the story, but it's just a little easier to
It
use.
is a little easier, I think.
It's a little easier to use, but you can find me either way. And website, kateactoncounseling.com. As in my intro, I'm not taking on any new clients, sadly, because I love clients and I love this job. But we also gotta get a baby here.
That's right.
So my books for new clients will open back up in mid-fall. But in the meantime, I'm hoping to still use social media as it feels comfortable for me to be able to post things like this, that when these circumstances have come up, it was incredibly helpful for me to be able to be like, okay, we're gonna educate, we're gonna do what we can. And so there's little, thought bubbles that come out. I also like to cross share a lot of local resources for Kansas City folks. To if they need mental health support and I can't take on the client, I have some connections and sharing resources. And just there's honestly the community in Kansas City for moms especially is really incredible. So cross sharing resources, a few just thoughts along the way for me. And so that's a good place to kind of find that, and then stay up to date when my books open back up for clients in the fall.
Amazing. I will have all of that in the show notes, your Instagram, Facebook, website, all of that. People can find you, people can follow along, people can be educated. I love it. Thank you again for the time. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone for listening. Continue to educate yourself, continue to speak appropriately. I feel like there is space for change. We know there is space for change, and I feel like together we can make some improvement. So be curious, not judgmental, and make it a great one. Thanks.